Oh, hello, and welcome to another episode of News from the Gelding. Okay, so today I'm going to attempt a bit of live writing for my second book, the sequel to James of Galendar. I've started the chapter a little, but what I'm going to do is the next section that's coming, I'm just going to write from scratch as I normally do. So if you fancy watching that, bear with me and we'll see what happens. See you in a bit. Okay, hello and welcome back. Now, if you're new to my channel, what I've started doing recently, in fact, well, just last week, is I'm reading a random page each time from my first book, James of Galendar. So before I get on with the live writing, let's do that. Okay, so earlier I did a random number generation and we came up with 238. So page 238. I'm just reading random passages just to give a flavour of my writing, I suppose. So here we go. James crawled backwards, unable to take his eyes from the monstrosity clawing its way towards him. The demon's many eyes were now destroyed, but it still continued to drag itself remorselessly forward as its limbs were hacked from beneath it. It wasn't until the last of its quivering tentacles was severed that the vast bulk of its immobile body finally tumbled to a halt. Exhausted, the warriors stood around the hideous remains of the beast, warily keeping their distance, as though only now registering the enormity of the creature they had felled. It was as they looked uncertainly on that the great mouth of the demon gurgled upon its final words. "It will never end." Crikey. Well, there we are. Random page. That's towards the end when they're trying to fight a great big beast. Anyway, so I'm working on the sequel to James of Galendar. Doesn't have a finished name at the moment, but I'm quite a long way into it now. I think I'm working on chapter 30, I think, or 29 or 30. I've written maybe 700 words as a beginning to the chapter, so the next part of the chapter is totally, I can go wherever, I've got an idea of where I'm going, but I don't use notes usually. This is just my journal. Close that. I tend to do is have a generalized idea of where I'm going with the story as a whole, a very, very vague outline, and then I just go with the flow to a certain extent. I know there's different terms for it, gardeners versus architects, planners or outliners versus pantsers, flying by the seat of your pants kind of style. Mine is more towards the flying by the seat of the pants style, because I think more interesting things can be generated when you just go with your imagination and let it take you. But you've got to be careful with that approach, and sometimes you find yourself tying yourself in knots. But on the whole, I really like this approach. So today, I know that my characters are crossing a river and are coming across a community of some sort. But who says what? Who does what, and what they see is largely a mystery. So, without further ado, I'll set it up and we'll see what happens. Don't expect anything. This isn't a reflection of my writing. This is the very first stage of my process, and I then revise the hell out of it. And quite often just get rid of it altogether. But anyway, let's see what happens. Grab a cup of tea. Could be quite boring for a lot of people, but anyway, if you fancy it, let's give it a go. Okay, see you in a bit. Okay, so I don't normally do that before writing, but seeing as I've got it there, let's give it a blow. Right, so in the background there's some scaffolders outside, a bit of noise going on, and already I can feel that this is going to be tricky. I don't normally do this. Normally I darken the room, light a candle, write some runes on the walls, not that part, but you know. Anyway, I'm more relaxed. This is going to be a bit forced, so I'm not quite sure how this is going to turn out. Okay, but anyway, let's see what happens. Oh. Right, this is awful. 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 By late morning, they had crossed the great river that divided the valley in two. Despite the storm that had raged all through the previous day and night, the river was mercifully shallow. Mercifully shallow. Even so, James struggled to wade through the chest-high waters, the cold stealing his breath as much as his energy. The west bank was consumed by forest. Awful. Right, let's end it there. This is awful. So in my right, let's switch away from here because it's awful. Haha. Okay, in my head, I've got an idea of where they're going. Cross a river, go through a forest that's taken over what was once a populated area, and then encountering a community of sorts. What I then tend to do is I'll write in fairly simple terms what they encounter, as I did then. But this isn't a pleasant stage for me. It's not very, I mean, hardly any of that, if anything, will be used. But it forms a bedrock on which I can build more interesting structures. So anyway, I don't know how useful that was to anyone. As you can see, I'm quite demoralized by what I did, but this is normal for me to a certain extent. Sometimes it flows a bit better, and I've got a better grasp of what's going to come. But this bit's I've been thinking about it only for a day or so, so it's not fully formed enough in my head, enough to get to grips with getting this bedrock down. That doesn't make sense, but anyway. Right, let's end it there. Thanks for watching this far if you have. I don't know if I'll do that again. If I do, no, probably won't. Anyway, thanks for watching and see you next week. Cheerio.